In the brochures, it was described as the pinnacle of urban living, a 70-story needle of glass and reinforced steel, piercing the smog of the city. I moved into Unit 4204 3 years ago. I'm a structural engineer by trade. I look at buildings and I see load paths, shear walls, and tension cables. I bought this place because I knew how it was built. I knew the dampeners in the core could withstand a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. I knew the glass was rated for hurricane-force winds. I thought I was buying safety. I thought I was buying a view. But you can't engineer for the ocean deciding it wants its land back. My name is Miles. And for the last 3 days, I haven't seen the ground. I haven't seen the streetlights, or the traffic, or the tops of the trees in the park. I only see the grey. It started on a Thursday. The forecast called it a hypercane event, a storm system so massive it didn't even look real on the radar. Just a solid block of red covering the entire coastline. The rain started at noon. It wasn't normal rain. It was heavy, oily. It hit the windows with a violence that made the glass vibrate. By 4 p.m., the sewers had backed up. By 6 p.m., the streets were rivers. But the real event, the surge, happened at midnight. I was awake, watching the news. The anchors were panicked, shouting about a geological slip on the continental shelf. Then the feed cut. Just static. Then I felt it. Living on the 42nd floor, you get used to the building moving. Tall buildings are designed to sway. If they were rigid, they'd snap. But this wasn't a sway. This was a shudder. It felt like the building had been kicked in the shins. A deep, groaning sound echoed through the concrete skeleton of the tower. It was the sound of steel rebar screaming under tension. My coffee cup slid off the table and shattered. The lights flickered, once, twice, and died. Total darkness. Then came the sound from outside. It sounded like a freight train, but wetter. A low, churning roar. I stumbled to the floor-to-ceiling window and pressed my hand against the cold glass. I couldn't see anything. The storm was too thick. But I could hear the city below me dying. I heard the transformer stations exploding, blue flashes lighting up the rain for split seconds. I heard the car alarms, thousands of them, all merging into one discordant wail. And then, one by one, the alarms stopped. Not because they were turned off, but because they were smothered. The water hit the city like a hammer. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I spent that first night sitting on my expensive Italian leather sofa, wrapped in a duvet, shivering. The building's emergency lights kicked on in the hallway, dim, sickly yellow strips powered by the backup batteries. But inside my unit, it was pitch black. When the sun rose, or what passed for sunrise in this new world, I finally saw what had happened. I walked to the window. My breath fogged the glass. The city was gone. The streets, the shops, the parks, erased. The water level wasn't at the ground. It wasn't even at the second floor. It was halfway up the skyline. A thick, opaque body of water, brown and churning with debris, had swallowed everything up to the 15th floor. I looked down and saw cars floating like bath toys. I saw a billboard for a law firm drifting past, bumping gently against the side of the building next door. But it wasn't just the water. It was the fog. Rising off the surface of this new ocean was a dense, white vapor. It was unnaturally thick, clinging to the sides of the skyscrapers like mold. It smelled faint but distinct, like brine, sulfur, and wet drywall. The fog obscured everything below floor 20. It created a false floor, a cloud layer that made it look like my apartment was floating in the sky. But I knew what was under that white blanket. The dead. I tried the tap in the kitchen. A sputter of brown air. Then nothing. The pumps in the basement were gone. That meant no fresh water. I tried the light switch. Nothing. The main grid was severed. The Zenith had backup generators, massive diesel engines, but, and I cursed myself for knowing the blueprints so well, they were located on sub-level 2. They were underwater. They were scrap metal now. That left the emergency circuit. It was battery-powered, meant to keep the stairwell lights and the fire suppression system active for 48 hours. After that, the building would go completely dark. I had to take stock. I'm an engineer. I solve problems. Panic is just a variable I couldn't afford. I raided my pantry. 6 cans of soup. A box of crackers. 2 bottles of wine. A half-empty jar of peanut butter. And, thankfully, the 5-gallon jug of water in the dispenser I'd just replaced yesterday. It wasn't enough. Not for the long haul. I needed to secure my perimeter. The Zenith had 70 floors. I was on 42. There were people above me, and people below me. People below me who were closer to the rising water. I grabbed my heavy maglite flashlight and a pry bar from my toolkit. I opened my apartment door and stepped into the hallway. It was silent. The yellow emergency strips cast long, creepy shadows. The carpet was damp. The humidity in the building was already rising, traveling up the elevator shafts like a chimney. "Hello," I called out. The door to Unit 4202 opened. Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who usually wore pearls and smelled of lavender, poked her head out. She was wearing a bathrobe, her hair messy. "Miles," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "The TV won't turn on, and the toilet won't flush." "I know, Mrs. Gable," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The power is out. The water is out. When will they fix it?" she asked, looking at me with childlike hope. "I don't know," I lied. "They weren't coming to fix it. There was no they left." I walked over to her. "You need to fill your bathtub with whatever water is left in the pipes. Right now. Go to the lowest tap in your apartment and open it. Catch every drop." She nodded, confused but obedient, and closed her door. I walked toward the stairwell access. The stairwell was the spine of the building. Concrete steps, steel railings, echoing acoustics. I opened the heavy fire door. The sound hit me instantly. Drip, drip, drip. And underneath that, a low, rhythmic sloshing. I leaned over the railing and shined my maglite down into the void. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating flight after flight of stairs. Down around the 30th floor, the beam hit the fog. It was swirling inside the stairwell, rising up the shaft. The white mist reflected the light, making it impossible to see past it. But I could hear it. The water was inside the building. The pressure of the surge must have blown out the lower windows or the lobby doors. The ocean was filling the Zenith like a bottle. I did the math in my head. A cubic meter of seawater weighs roughly 1,025 kilograms. If the lobby and the first 10 floors were full, that was thousands of tons of extra weight on the foundation. The Zenith was designed for wind load, for lateral force. It wasn't designed to be a tank. If the water kept rising, the structural integrity of the lower columns would be compromised. The concrete would saturate. The rebar would corrode. The building wouldn't tip over. It would crumble from the bottom up. I needed to know how high the water was. I started to descend. I walked down from 42, past 41, past 40. On the landing of the 38th floor, I saw someone sitting on the steps. It was a man in pajamas, hugging his knees, rocking back and forth. He looked up as my light hit him. His face was grey, his eyes hollow. "Don't go down there," he whispered. "How high is it?" I asked. "The fog," he said, ignoring my question. "The fog is on 25. The water is on 20. But there's something else." I paused. "What do you mean?" He pointed a shaking finger into the white mist swirling below us. "I heard them. In the water. Splashing. Screaming. Survivors." I asked. He shook his head slowly. "Not anymore." I gripped the pry bar tighter. I had to see. I left him shivering on the stairs and kept going down. Floor 35. The air got colder, heavier. Floor 30. The smell was stronger here. Brine and rot. Floor 28. The emergency lights were dead here. I was in total darkness, save for my flashlight beam. At floor 26, I hit the fog. It wasn't like walking into a cloud. It was like walking into a freezer. The temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly. The beam of my flashlight scattered, creating a wall of white glare. I couldn't see my own feet. I took a step down. My boot crunched on something wet. I aimed the light down. The stairs were slick with condensation. I took another step, and another. Then I heard it. Splash. It was close. Just one flight down. Floor 25. "Hello," I whispered. The sound died in the heavy air. Splash. Scrape. It sounded like something wet dragging itself over the concrete. It wasn't the rhythmic sloshing of the tide. It was deliberate. Movement. I froze, holding my breath. Through the white soup of the mist, I saw a shape on the landing below. A dark, huddled mass. It was coughing. A wet, hacking cough that sounded like lungs full of fluid. "Hey," I called out, finding my voice. "Do you need help?" The shape stopped coughing. It shifted. And then a face lunged out of the fog. It was a man, or it had been. His skin was pale, bloated, waterlogged. His eyes were red, irritated by the salt and the chemicals. But the terrifying part was the panic. He was clawing at the stairs, scrabbling upwards on hands and knees. "Close it!" he shrieked at me, his voice a gargle. "Close the door!" "What?" I stepped back. "The water!" he screamed, grabbing the railing and hauling himself up. "It's not just water. Something came in with the tide." Behind him, from the white void of the 24th floor, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. It was a click. A rapid, chitinous clicking sound, like a crab scuttling on stone, but louder, heavier, and then a low hiss. The man scrambled past me, knocking me into the wall. He didn't look back. He just ran up the stairs into the darkness. I stood there on the landing of floor 26, the fog swirling around my waist. The clicking sound was getting closer, rising. I looked down into the mist. I saw a shadow, long, spindly, too many limbs. I turned and ran. Fear is a structural load. That's how I have to think about it. If you let it exceed your capacity, you buckle. You collapse. I ran. I didn't just run. I scrambled. My boots hammered against the concrete steps, a frantic rhythm that echoed up the shaft. Thud, 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 thud. Behind me, below the layer of white fog, the clicking sound was intensifying. It wasn't just one source anymore. It sounded like a bag of marbles being spilled onto a tile floor, multiplied by 100. Click, click, hiss, scrape. I passed the 30th floor. My lungs were burning. The air in the stairwell was thick with that chemical brine smell, heavy enough to taste. It coated the back of my throat like oil. I passed the man I had seen earlier, the guy on the 38th floor. He was still sitting there, rocking back and forth. "Get up!" I yelled as I flew past him. I didn't stop. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked him forward. "Move! They're coming up!" He looked at me with glazed eyes, but the panic in my voice must have pierced his shock. He scrambled to his feet. He didn't ask questions. He heard the sound, the wet, chitinous scratching coming from the darkness below, and he started to run too. We hit the 42nd floor landing together. I shoved the heavy fire door open and pulled him through into the hallway. The moment we were both across the threshold, I slammed the door shut. Clang. The sound was reassuringly heavy. Solid steel core. Fire rated for 3 hours. But it didn't have a lock. Stairwell doors in the Zenith were designed to be free passage for fire evacuation. They latched, but they didn't deadbolt. "Help me!" I shouted at the man. I dropped my pry bar and jammed the flat end under the door gap, kicking it tight. But it wasn't enough. If those things had force, if they could push, the wedge wouldn't hold. "What is it?" the man gasped, sliding down the wall. "What did you see?" "Not now," I snapped. I looked around the hallway. The emergency lights were flickering, dying. I needed mass. Resistance. I ran to Mrs. Gable's door, Unit 4202. I pounded on it. "Mrs. Gable, open up." She opened it a crack, looking terrified. "Miles? What's all the noise?" "I need your console table," I said. "The oak one in the hallway. Now." I didn't wait for permission. I pushed past her, grabbed the heavy oak table she kept her keys on, and dragged it out into the corridor. The other man, let's call him the runner, finally snapped out of his daze. He grabbed the other end. We jammed the table against the fire door, wedging it under the handle. It wasn't a perfect barricade, but it created a triangle of force. To open that door, you'd have to break the table legs. I stepped back, chest heaving, shining my mag light on the steel door. We waited. For a minute, there was only the sound of our breathing and the distant drumming of the rain outside. Then, a sound came from the other side of the steel. Scritch. It was gentle at first, like a fingernail testing the paint. Then, a thud. Something heavy impacted the door near the bottom. The oak table groaned, but held. Then came the clicking. It was right against the seam of the door. I imagined mandibles or claws, feeling the gap, sensing the heat of the bodies on the other side. "What are they?" the runner whispered. His face was slick with sweat. "I don't know," I said quietly. "Deep sea. Arthropods. Crabs. Something that usually lives under 5,000 psi of pressure. They came up with the surge," he said. "Yeah. And now they're exploring." The scratching continued for another minute, then faded. They were testing the perimeter. They realized the door was hard, and they moved on, probably up to the 43rd floor, or back down to the water. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "I'm Miles," I said, offering a hand to the runner. He looked at my hand, then took it. His grip was weak, clammy. "Jax," he said. "I'm from 38. My girlfriend was still in the bedroom when the window blew out. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. We retreated to my apartment. It was the command center now. Unit 4204. I locked my front door. Deadbolt. Chain. It felt flimsy compared to the fire door, but it was another layer. "Mrs. Gable," I said gently, guiding her to my sofa. "You stay here. Don't open the door for anyone unless you hear my voice." Jax sat on the floor, staring at the wall. "We're trapped," he muttered. "Water below. Those things in the stairs. We're just meat in a can." "We're not meat," I said, my voice hardening. "We're in a fortress. The Zenith is reinforced concrete. We have height. We have cover. But inside, my engineer brain was screaming. I walked to the window again. The darkness outside was absolute, except for the occasional flash of lightning. But I could feel the change in the building. The vibration was different now. The Zenith was a tuned mass damper system. It was designed to counter wind sway. But now, the base was anchored in water. The harmonic frequency of the tower had shifted. The groans from the rebar were lower, longer. And the air. I walked to the kitchen and checked the vent hood. I held a lighter up to it. The flame didn't flicker. There was no draw. "The HVAC stack is flooded," I muttered. "What does that mean?" Jax asked. "It means the building isn't breathing," I said. "Skyscrapers are machines. They inhale and exhale. If the intakes at the bottom are underwater, and the exhaust fans on the roof are dead, the air is going to get stale. Carbon dioxide buildup. Humidity. And the fog," Jax added. "Right. The fog." The fog wasn't just weather. I had smelled it in the stairwell. It was methane. Hydrogen sulfide. The gases released from a rotting ocean floor, trapped inside the building's shell. "We need to seal the vents," I said. "Duct tape. Towels. Anything. If that gas comes through the AC ducts, we'll suffocate in our sleep." For the next 2 hours, we worked. It was better than thinking. We taped up the vents in the bathroom, the kitchen, the laundry room. We rolled up towels and jammed them under the front door. We created a sealed bubble inside Unit 4204. By 3 a.m., the adrenaline had completely worn off, leaving a heavy, grey exhaustion. Mrs. Gable had fallen asleep on the sofa. Jax was curled up on the rug. I sat in the armchair, facing the door. My pry bar was across my lap. My mag light was off to save batteries. I listened to the building. I heard the settling cracks of concrete. I heard the wind howling around the glass skin of the tower. And every 20 minutes or so, I heard a click-click-click inside the walls. They were in the utility chasers, the pipes, the spaces between the floors. They weren't just in the stairwell. They were infesting the structure like termites. Day 2 broke with a sickly, diffused light. There was no sun, just a lighter shade of grey pressing against the glass. I woke up with a stiff neck and a mouth that tasted like pennies. Jax was already awake, standing at the window. "Miles," he said. His voice was flat. "Look." I joined him. The water had risen. Yesterday, I estimated it was at the 20th floor. Today, the debris field, the floating cars, the trash, the pieces of houses, was drifting past the 25th floor windows of the building opposite us. 5 floors in 12 hours. "It's not stopping," Jax said. "Why isn't it receding? Storm surges go back out." "The land sank," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The tectonic plate slipped. "This isn't a surge, Jax. This is the new sea level. I looked down. The fog was thicker today. It had risen with the water. It was swirling around the 35th floor now. We had maybe 7 floors of buffer before the toxic air reached our windows. "We need supplies," I said. "My pantry won't last 3 people more than a few days." "Go back out there?" Jax looked at me like I was insane. "Into the hall?" "Not down," I said. "Up." I pulled out a crumpled set of building schematics I kept in my home office. The Zenith has a sky lounge on the 60th floor, a VIP club, bar, kitchen, private dining, food, high-end food, canned goods in the back, liquor, and bottled water. But the stairs. "We don't take the stairs all the way," I said. "We take the service elevator shaft. The elevators are dead." "I know. But the maintenance hatch is on the ceiling of the car. If the car for the service lift is stopped on this floor or near it, we can climb the cables. It's a straight shot up. No fog. And hopefully, no crabs." It was a risk. A massive one. But staying here meant starving or suffocating. I geared up. I put on my heavy work boots. I taped magazines around my forearms. Poor man's armor. I gave Jax a heavy wrench from my toolkit. "Mrs. Gable," I said, "lock the door behind us. Do not open it." We stepped out into the hallway. The barricade at the stairwell door was still holding, but the door itself was dented. The steel was bowed outward slightly near the bottom. Something strong had tried to get in during the night. We moved quietly to the elevator bank. The silver doors were shut tight. I used the pry bar to wedge the center seam. "On 3, I whispered. 1, 2, 3. We heaved. The doors slid open with a grinding screech that sounded like a gunshot in the silent hallway. I shined the light into the shaft. The elevator car wasn't there. We were looking into a dark, vertical tunnel that stretched up and down into infinity. "Where is it?" Jax whispered. I shone the light down. About 10 feet below us, I saw the roof of the elevator car. It was stuck between floors 41 and 42. "Perfect," I said. But then I shone the light further down, past the car, into the gap between the car and the wall. Far below, deep in the shaft, I saw movement. The shaft wasn't empty. The walls of the elevator shaft were lined with them. Hundreds of them. Pale, multi-legged shapes clinging to the guide rails, clustering on the cables. They were sleeping, or nesting. They looked like giant isopods, armored, pale lice the size of German shepherds, and they were all facing downward, toward the water. "Don't drop anything," I mouthed to Jax. We had to jump down onto the elevator car roof, open the hatch, climb the cables past floor 42, and ascend 18 stories, suspended over a pit of sleeping monsters. I looked at Jax. He was trembling, but he nodded. I sat on the edge of the open door frame, my legs dangling into the abyss. The smell of ammonia rising from the shaft was eye-watering. I took a breath, gripped the pry bar, and lowered myself onto the cables. There is a specific kind of silence inside an elevator shaft. It's not empty silence. It's pressurized. It's the sound of air trapped in a vertical concrete throat. I was clinging to the guide rail, a T-shaped steel beam that runs the height of the building. My boots were wedged against the brackets. My hands were gloved, wrapped around the greasy, cold metal. 10 feet below me, Jax was hyperventilating. I could hear the whistle in his nose. "Don't look down," I whispered. The acoustic was weird in here. My whisper traveled up and down like a bouncy ball. "Jax." Look at my boots. Just look at my boots. I can't, he wheezed. My hands are slipping. The grease. Wrap your arms around the rail, I instructed, keeping my voice flat. Hug it like a tree. Use your legs to push. I shined my light downward, just for a second, to check his position. I regretted it immediately. The beam cut through the gloom and hit the wall 10 floors down. The infestation was denser there. The pale, armored shapes were clustered like barnacles, overlapping each other. They were motionless, their multi-jointed legs tucked tight against their bodies. They were sleeping, or incubating. Move, I said. One rung at a time. We began to climb. It was grueling. The service ladder was rusted in places, and where it was missing, we had to shimmy up the guide rails or grab the thick, braided hoisting cables. The cables were the worst. They swung. Every time I pulled myself up, the cable swayed, and that vibration traveled all the way down into the dark. Swish! Swish! We passed the 45th floor. The doors were closed, sealed tight. We passed the 50th floor. My arms were burning. The lactic acid was building up in my shoulders, turning my muscles into stone. But I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I'd think about the drop. I'd think about the click-click-click waiting at the bottom. At floor 55, disaster struck. Jax reached for a bracket. His hand slipped on a patch of hydraulic oil. He flailed, his body swinging out over the abyss. He gasped a loud, sharp intake of air, and his foot kicked the hollow metal door of the 55th floor landing. Boom! The sound was like a gong. It reverberated up and down the shaft, amplified by the concrete acoustics. I froze. I locked my arms around the cable and squeezed my eyes shut. Below us, the silence broke. It started as a ripple, a rustle of shell against stone. Then a single click. Then 10. Then 100. The hive was waking up. Don't move, I hissed at Jax. Don't even breathe. The sound of the clicking rose like a wave. It was an agitated, inquisitive sound. They were sensing the vibration. I looked down. I couldn't help it. The wall of the shaft seemed to ripple. The pale shapes were unfurling. Legs were testing the air. Antennae the length of fishing rods were waving in the darkness, tasting the scent of our sweat, our fear. I saw one of them, a smaller one, maybe the size of a microwave, detach from the wall and scuttle up the guide rail. It moved with terrifying speed, fluid and jerky at the same time. It stopped at floor 50. It tapped its antennae against the metal door Jax had kicked 5 floors higher. It waited. I held my breath until my lungs screamed. The creature hesitated. Then, slowly, it turned around and crawled back down into the cluster. They were blind, or mostly blind. They relied on vibration and sound. The echo had confused them. They couldn't pinpoint the source. The clicking subsided. The wave settled back into a dormant rustle. Go, I mouthed to Jax. Slow. Smooth. We climbed the last 5 floors in agonizing slow motion. Every muscle tremor felt like a shout. When we reached the doors of floor 60, I was shaking so bad I could barely hold the pry bar. The Sky Lounge doors were different. Polished brass, not steel. I wedged the bar into the seam and leveraged my weight. Creak, pop. The doors slid open. We rolled out of the shaft and onto the carpet. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, gasping for air. The floor wasn't concrete. It was plush, deep-pile wool. The air didn't smell like brine and ozone. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, expensive leather, and perfume. "We made it," Jax whispered, wiping grease from his face. I sat up and clicked off my mag light. I didn't need it. The Sky Lounge had windows, floor-to-ceiling panoramic glass that wrapped around the entire 60th floor. And outside, the world was glowing. It wasn't sunlight. It was the diffuse, ambient light of the moon filtering through the cloud layer, reflecting off the infinite sea of white fog below us. We were above the main fog bank now. The view was apocalyptic and beautiful. The tops of the other skyscrapers poked out of the white clouds like islands in an archipelago. The Bank of America Tower, the Salesforce spire. They were dark, dead monoliths standing in a sea of vapor. "Look at the water," Jack said, standing at the glass. I joined him. From this height, through the gaps in the fog, I could see the water stretching to the horizon. There was no coast, no hills, just ocean. But inside was a different story. The lounge was wrecked, tables overturned, bottles smashed behind the bar. "Hello," I called out. "Hands up," a voice said from the shadows. "Drop the crowbar." I froze. The voice was calm, authoritative. "Male." I slowly set the pry bar on the carpet and raised my hands. Jax did the same. From the dark corner of the VIP section, 3 figures stepped out. The leader was a man in his 50s. He was wearing a tuxedo, tie undone, collar open. He held a high-end hunting rifle, the kind with a walnut stock and a thermal scope. Behind him were 2 younger men. They looked like gym rats, tight t-shirts, muscles, baseball bats. Private security? Or just tough guys who found a new boss? "You climbed the shaft," the tuxedo man said. "It wasn't a question. We heard the bang on 55. You're lucky the crabs didn't swarm you." "We're just looking for food," I said. "We're from 42. 42, the man mused. "Middle management territory. I'm Sterling. Penthouse." He lowered the rifle slightly, but didn't safe it. "There's no food here for you," Sterling said. "We've secured the perimeter. This floor is under quarantine." I looked at the bar behind him. I could see stacks of cases. Water, canned gourmet olives, dried meats, crackers, enough to feed an army for a month. "We have an old woman down there," I said, "and we're running out of water." "Tragic," Sterling said, taking a sip from a crystal tumbler. "But resources are finite, and honestly, you 2 look like liabilities. You reek of the shaft." Jax stepped forward, angry. "We climbed 60 floors while you sat up here drinking scotch. We're taking what we need." One of the muscle guys stepped forward, slapping the bat into his palm. "Stop," I said, putting an arm in front of Jax. I looked at Sterling. I needed leverage. This was a negotiation, not a fight. I couldn't fight a rifle with a wrench. "You're swaying," I said. Sterling blinked. "Excuse me." "The floor," I said. "Can't you feel it? The vibration? It's hitting about 0.5 Hertz. That's the resonant frequency of the tuned mass damper." Sterling frowned. He lowered the glass. "I feel the sway. It's a storm." "It's not a storm," I lied, well half-lied. "The foundation is scouring. The water current is eating the soil around the piles. If the frequency changes, the dampener locks up. If it locks up, the torque will snap the upper floors off like a twig." Sterling went pale. "You're an engineer?" "Structural," I said. I know this building's bones. I know why the lights are out. I know how to manually reset the dampener hydraulics so we don't tip over into the ocean. It was technobabble. Mostly. The dampener was passive. It didn't need resetting. But Sterling didn't know that. He was a money guy. He understood assets and risks. He studied me for a long moment. He looked at the swaying chandelier above his head. He looked at the dark ocean outside. "What do you want?" Sterling asked. "2 backpacks," I said. "Full. Water, protein, carbs, and batteries." Sterling nodded to the muscle guys. "Fill 2 bags. Give them the cheap stuff. Crackers, tuna, tap water bottles. And the good water," I added. "And a radio if you have one." Sterling laughed. A dry, humorless bark. "Radio? There's nobody to call, engineer. We've been scanning the bands for 3 days. No Coast Guard. No Navy. Just static and screams." He walked over to the window and looked out at the dead city. "The world didn't just end," Sterling whispered, almost to himself. "It was evicted." While the goons packed the bags, I walked to the window next to Sterling. I needed to see what he was looking at. "Have you seen them?" I asked quietly. "The things in the shaft? The lice?" Sterling sneered. "Nasty little bugs. We threw a waiter down the shaft yesterday. They stripped him to the bone in 4 minutes. We timed it. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. These people were dangerous. Maybe more dangerous than the crabs." "There's something else," Sterling said, pointing a manicured finger at the glass. "Look out there. Between the gap in the fog. Watch the water." I pressed my forehead to the cold glass. I looked down at the dark, swirling water between our tower and the ruins of the financial district. At first, I saw nothing, just the black swell of the ocean. Then, the water broke. It was massive. A shape. Serpentine. Darker than the water. It rose up, an arch of slick, grey flesh that must have been 50 feet long, and that was just the part breaking the surface. It moved with a slow, heavy grace, slithering between the submerged buildings. It didn't look like a whale. It looked like a worm. A deep earth tremor made flesh. It slid back under the water without a splash. "What was that?" I whispered. "That," Sterling said, taking a drink, "is the landlord. We're just the tenants now." The muscle guy tossed 2 backpacks at my feet. "Get out." I grabbed the bags. They were heavy. "Life." "One more thing," Sterling said as we turned to the elevator doors. "If the building starts to sway too much, I'm coming down to find you, engineer. And if you lied to me, I'll feed you to the shaft." "Understood," I said. The descent was worse than the climb. Going down a cable is faster, but stopping is harder. And we were heavier now with the supplies. We didn't speak. We slid down the grease-slicked cables, breaking with our boots against the rails, praying the friction didn't set us on fire or make a sound. We passed the sleeping hive on floor 55. They were still restless, legs twitching in the dark, but they didn't attack. When we hit the roof of the elevator car on floor 42, I collapsed. My hands were cramped into claws. I couldn't open them. Jax pried the doors open. We tumbled into the hallway of the 42nd floor. I immediately rolled over and jammed the pry bar back into the door seam, sealing the shaft. "We got it," Jax panted, hugging his backpack. "We actually got it." I stood up, legs shaking. I knocked on Unit 4204. "Mrs. Gable?" It's Miles. The door opened. She was there, holding a candle. She looked frail, terrified. "Oh, thank heavens," she said. I heard noises, scratching at the walls. I walked inside and dropped the bag on the table. Tuna, crackers, water. It wasn't a feast, but it was another week of life. I walked to the window. I couldn't see the giant worm thing from here. The fog was too thick. But I knew it was out there, swimming through the streets I used to drive on. I looked at Jax. He was opening a can of peaches with shaking hands, feeding a slice to Mrs. Gable. We had food. We had a secure room. But as I looked at the vent I had taped up earlier, I saw the duct tape peeling back. Just a corner. It was fluttering. There was air moving in the vent. But the fans were off. I leaned closer. Sniff. Sniff. The sound wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from inside the duct. Something was sniffing the air from the other side of the grate. The crabs weren't just in the elevator shaft. They were in the HVAC system, and they had found a way into the apartment. The human brain is wired to ignore things it can't understand. It tries to rationalize. It's just the wind, you tell yourself. It's just the pipes settling. But wind doesn't sniff. I watched the HVAC vent high on the wall near the kitchen ceiling. It was a standard aluminum grill, held in place by 4 screws, covered in the duct tape we had applied hours ago. The tape was bulging outward. Something inside the duct was pushing against the metal grate. Pop. The bottom left screw gave way. It shot across the room and hit the granite countertop. Mrs. Gable whimpered. She was clutching a can of peaches like a talisman. "Jax," I whispered. "Get Mrs. Gable into the bedroom. Lock the door. Put the dresser in front of it." "What about you?" Jax asked, his eyes wide, fixed on the vent. "I'm going to introduce myself," I said. I gripped the heavy steel pry bar in my right hand and the maglite in my left. Jax grabbed Mrs. Gable's arm. "Come on." They scrambled into the bedroom. The door clicked shut. I heard the scrape of furniture being dragged. Good. I turned back to the vent. The second screw popped. The metal grill bent outward, screeching. I stood directly under it. I knew how these ducts ran. They were galvanized steel, rectangular, maybe 12 by 18 inches, tight for a human, but perfect for something designed to crawl. The smell hit me first. A concentrated wave of ammonia and rotten kelp. It made my eyes water. Then, the grill fell. It clattered to the floor. For a second, there was nothing. Just the dark, square hole in the drywall. Then, 2 long, pale feelers slowly emerged. They waved in the air, testing the temperature. They were translucent, covered in tiny, twitching hairs. I didn't wait. I swung the pry bar with everything I had. I aimed for the darkness between the feelers. Crunch. The impact vibrated up my arm. I hit something hard. Chitin shell. A high-pitched shriek erupted from the wall, a sound like grinding metal. The creature didn't retreat. It lunged. It exploded out of the vent, a tangle of pale legs and segmented armor. It landed on the kitchen island, shattering the decorative vase. It was hideous. It looked like a cross between a giant isopod and a flea, about the size of a bobcat. It had too many legs, all hooked and serrated. Its underbelly was soft, pulsing and grey. Its face was just a cluster of black, bead-like eyes and a vertical slit of a mouth that dripped blue ichor. It hissed at me, rearing up on its back legs. I swung again. The bar connected with its side. The shell cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The creature was heavy, dense. It absorbed the blow and snapped at me. Its mandibles clamped onto the pry bar. It yanked, displaying shocking strength. It almost tore the steel tool out of my grip. "Get back!" I yelled, more to myself than the bug. I kicked the kitchen stool at it. The creature deflected it with a sweep of a clawed leg. It was fast. Too fast. It skittered across the countertop and launched itself at me. I ducked. It sailed over my head and landed on the sofa, right where Mrs. Gable had been sleeping 10 minutes ago. Its claws shredded the Italian leather instantly. I shone the light in its eyes. It recoiled, hissing, hating the brightness. Light sensitivity, I noted. Deep sea adaptation. "Jax!" I screamed. "The window!" "What?" Jax yelled from behind the bedroom door. "Not you! Stay there!" I ran to the floor-to-ceiling window. The creature was recovering, turning toward me. I grabbed a heavy bronze statue from the side table, some abstract piece of art I had paid too much for. I hurled it at the window glass. Crash! The tempered glass didn't shatter. It spider-webbed. The Zenith's windows were rated for hurricanes. They wouldn't break easily. The creature charged. I sidestepped, swinging the pry bar like a baseball bat. I hit it mid-air, knocking it sideways into the wall. It shrieked again, leaking blue fluid onto the carpet. I picked up the heavy dining chair and smashed it against the already cracked window. Crash! The glass gave way. The wind howled into the apartment immediately, carrying rain and fog. The pressure differential sucked the air out of the room. The creature scrambled to its feet, clicking furiously. It prepared to jump. I stepped aside, putting the broken window behind me. "Come on, you ugly bastard!" I yelled. It leaped. I dropped to the floor. The creature sailed over me, expecting to hit a body. Instead, it hit the open air. It flailed for a second, claws grasping at the wind, and then it was gone, plummeting 42 stories down into the fog. I lay on the floor, panting. The wind whipped the curtains around the room. The rain soaked the expensive rug. The vent was still open, and from deep inside the wall, I heard more clicking. "Jax!" I yelled. "Get out here! We have to go! Now!" Jax burst out of the bedroom, helping Mrs. Gable. She was trembling so hard she could barely walk. "Where?" Jax screamed over the wind. "The hall! We can't stay here!" I grabbed the backpacks. "The vents connect every unit. They're all coming. The whole building is a highway for them now." We ran into the hallway. I slammed the apartment door, but I knew it wouldn't hold them for long. We stood in the flickering yellow light of the corridor on floor 42. "Up is Sterling," Jack said, panic rising in his voice. "Down is the water. The rooms are infested. Where do we go, Miles?" I closed my eyes for a second, visualizing the blueprints of the Zenith. Structural steel. Core layout. Annex connections. Floor 45, I said. "That's closer to the penthouse," Jax argued. "Not the apartments," I said. "The Sky Bridge. The Zenith connects to the Orion Tower, the office building next door, via a glass walkway on the 45th floor. It was a selling point for the executives. Live in the Zenith. Walk to work in the Orion." "Another building?" Mrs. Gable asked weakly. "The Orion is commercial," I explained, leading them toward the stairwell. "It has a different HVAC system, different foundation, and maybe Maybe it's empty. Or maybe it's worse, Jax muttered, but he followed. We reached the stairwell door. The barricade we had built earlier was pushed aside. The door was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack. The stairs going down were dark. The sound of the hive below was a steady, low thrumming now, like a generator. They were active. Quiet, I whispered. We only have to go up 3 floors. We moved, step by step. Floor 43. The door was dented outward. Something had tried to break out of the hallway into the stairs. I saw dried blood on the handle. Floor 44. The fog was seeping under the door here. The air was getting colder. Floor 45. We made it to the landing. I pushed the door open. The hallway of the 45th floor was different. It wasn't carpeted. It was tiled, sleek, corporate black marble. This was the transfer level. This way, I said, pointing my light down the corridor. At the end of the hall, I saw it. The sky bridge. It was a marvel of engineering. A tube of suspended glass and steel, spanning the 60-foot gap between the Zenith and the Orion Tower. It was totally transparent. But as we approached, I stopped. Oh no, I breathed. The bridge was moving. The Zenith was swaying in the floodwaters. The Orion Tower, which was a different shape and mass, was swaying too, but at a different frequency. The bridge between them was twisting. I could hear the steel groaned. The glass panels were flexing. "We have to cross that?" Jax asked, his voice cracking. "It's the only way out of the chimney," I said. I looked through the glass doors leading to the bridge. The fog outside was thick, swirling around the tube. I couldn't see the other side. I couldn't see the Orion Tower. Just a bridge leading into white nothingness. "I can't," Mrs. Gable whispered. "I can't do it, Miles." "You can," I said, grabbing her shoulders. "Because behind us is a wall full of bugs that want to eat you, and ahead of us is a bridge. It's a simple choice, Mrs. Gable. Gravity or teeth." She swallowed hard and nodded. I opened the access door. The wind noise was deafening instantly. The seals on the bridge were failing. "I'll go first," I shouted. "Jax, you bring up the rear. Mrs. Gable, hold my belt." We stepped onto the glass floor. It felt like walking on a living thing. Under my boots I could see nothing, just grey fog. If the glass broke, it was a 400-foot drop into the black water. The bridge pitched to the left. I threw my hand out to the rail. The Orion Tower had pulled away, stretching the expansion joints to their limit. Screech. The metal grinding sound vibrated through my teeth. "Keep moving," I yelled. We were halfway across. 30 feet from the Zenith. 30 feet to Orion. Suddenly, a shape loomed out of the fog above us. It slammed into the roof of the glass bridge. Thud. We all screamed. It was a body. A human body. It slid down the curved glass roof, leaving a smear of red, and tumbled off into the void. Did that fall from the penthouse?" Jax stammered. "Sterling," I muttered. "He's cleaning house." Another body hit the roof. Then another. They were being thrown off the roof of the Zenith. Sterling wasn't just hoarding supplies. He was actively purging the survivors he didn't want. Crack. I looked up. One of the falling bodies had hit a structural spider fitting on the glass roof. The panel above us shattered. Shards of safety glass rained down on us. The wind roared in through the hole. "Run!" I pulled Mrs. Gable. We scrambled the last 20 feet. The bridge was bouncing now, destabilized by the wind catching the broken panel. I reached the doors of the Orion Tower. They were locked. Of course, I cursed. Secure office building. Mag locks. I dropped my bag and grabbed the pry bar. I jammed it into the gap between the glass doors. "Jax, help me." He grabbed the bar. We pulled. Behind us, on the bridge, the glass floor panel where we had just been standing gave a sickening pop. A crack shot across it like lightning. "Heave!" I roared. The lock shattered. The doors flew open. We tumbled into the lobby of the Orion Tower's 45th floor. We dragged Mrs. Gable in and slammed the doors shut, jamming the pry bar through the handles just as the bridge floor panel outside disintegrated and fell into the sky. We collapsed on the grey commercial carpet. Silence. The Orion Tower was dead quiet. No hum of generators. No sound of water. Just the silence of an empty office. "We made it," Jax wheezed. "We're in." I stood up and shone my light around. It was a reception area for a law firm. Mahogany desks. Leather chairs. Expensive art. "Check the windows," I said. "I want to see the Zenith from here." We walked to the window, facing back the way we came. The fog had cleared momentarily, blown away by a gust of wind. I saw the Zenith. My home. And then I saw what was clinging to the side of it. It wasn't just the elevator shaft. The entire exterior of the building, from the waterline up to the 50th floor, was crawling. Thousands of them. A carpet of pale, clicking armor scaling the glass. They weren't just inside. They were swarming the tower like ants on a sugar cube. And as I watched, I saw the lights of the penthouse on the 60th floor flicker. Sterling thought he was safe because he had guns. But he didn't understand the structural load. "Miles," Jax whispered, pointing down at the Orion Tower's atrium below us. "Look." I looked away from the Zenith and down into the core of the building we had just broken into. The Orion Tower didn't have apartments. It had an open central atrium that went all the way down to the lobby. And the lobby was glowing. A faint, blue, pulsating light was coming from the water at the bottom of the atrium. And in the center of that light, something was rising. It wasn't the crabs. It wasn't the worm. It was something built. Corporate silence is different from residential silence. In an apartment building, silence feels wrong because you expect life. You expect TVs, footsteps, plumbing noises. But in an office tower at night, or at the end of the world, silence feels designed. It feels sterile. The 45th floor of the Orion Tower smelled like lemon polish and ozone. No rotting food. No unwashed bodies. Just the cold, recycled air of a dead bureaucracy. "Stay low," I whispered. Jax was leaning over the mahogany railing of the atrium, staring down. The Orion was built around a central hollow core, a 60-story vertical shaft that let natural light filter down to the lobby. Now, it was a 60-story well. The blue light was rising. It wasn't a biological glow. It didn't flicker like the phosphorescence of the creatures outside. It was a beam, a spotlight. It swept across the flooded ruins of the 10th floor balconies, then the 15th. It was ascending through the murky water filling the bottom of the building. "Is it a boat?" Jax asked, hope straining his voice. "Is it the Navy?" "Maybe," I said. But my gut said no. Navy rescue boats don't prowl inside office lobbies. I pulled Mrs. Gable away from the edge. "We need cover. If that's a searchlight, We don't want to be the first things it sees until we know who's holding the switch. We retreated into a conference room with glass walls. I grabbed a heavy executive chair and smashed the privacy frosting, creating a jagged spy hole. We watched. The surface of the black water in the atrium, which looked to be sitting around the 20th floor level, began to boil. Bubbles the size of basketballs erupted, popping with wet glugs. Then, the machine broke the surface. It wasn't a boat. It was a drone. It was a black, sleek, angular shape, about the size of a minivan. It had no cockpit, no windows, just a cluster of sensory arrays and cameras on the front, glowing with that piercing blue light. It floated on the water using hydrothrusters, humming with a high-pitched whine that set my teeth on edge. On the side, stenciled in white letters that were scratched but legible, USACE, Structural Assessment. Army Corps of Engineers, I whispered. They're here to save us? Mrs. Gable asked. No, I said, watching the machine. It's an assessment drone. It's checking the stability of the city. The drone didn't look for people. It rotated, its lasers scanning the support columns of the atrium. It fired a red laser grid at the wall, measuring stress fractures. It hovered there for a minute, analyzing the Orion Tower. Then, a loudspeaker on the drone clicked on. The sound was distorted, booming through the empty tower. Sector 4. Structure compromised. Foundation liquefaction detected. Collapse probability 85%. Evacuate immediate. The voice was synthetic, cold. Jax slumped against the wall. Collapse. This building too. The soil is gone, I said, rubbing my face. The surge washed away the sediment holding the piles. Every tower in this district is standing on mud that's turning into soup. The drone rotated again. It wasn't looking at us. It was looking through the glass skin of the Orion, out toward the Zenith. It scanned my old home. Structure critical, the drone announced. Biological infestation detected. Quarantine protocol active. Do not engage. It knew about the bugs. It called them a biological infestation. That meant the government knew. They knew before the water even hit. We have to get its attention, Jack said, standing up. It has a camera. If it sees us, maybe it sends a transport. Jax, wait, I hissed. He ran out to the balcony rail. He started waving his arms. Hey, down here. We're alive. Help. His voice echoed down the atrium. The drone stopped rotating. The blue spotlight snapped up, blindingly bright. It locked onto Jax. Unauthorized personnel, the drone boomed. This is a red zone. Shelter in place. Rescue teams are not deployed in this sector. Please. Jax screamed. We have an elderly woman. We have food. We just need a ride. The drone hovered, processing. For a second, I thought it might descend. But then, the water beneath the drone exploded. It wasn't the slow, majestic surfacing of the worm we saw earlier. This was a strike. Something massive, grey, and wet launched itself out of the black depths of the atrium. It was a tentacle. No, a tongue. A thick, muscular piston of flesh, lined with hooked suckers. It wrapped around the drone in a split second. Crunch. The metal chassis of the drone crumpled like a soda can. Sparks showered down into the water. The blue light spun wildly, illuminating the creature for just a flash. It wasn't a worm. It was a squid, or something related to a squid, but evolved for the deep trenches where light never touches. It had a beak the size of a car door. The drone exploded in a ball of electrical fire. The creature roared, a sound that wasn't a roar, but a high-pressure vibration that shook the glass walls of the conference room. Then, it dragged the burning wreckage of the robot back down into the dark water. Silence returned to the Orion. Jax backed away from the rail, his face white. It ate the robot. It reacted to the sound, I said, my voice trembling. The drone was loud. Jax. You were loud. I grabbed his arm. We have to move. Away from the atrium. Deeper into the floor plate. Interior offices. We retreated into the labyrinth of cubicles. We found a file room. No windows, thick walls. We huddled there, listening. The building was shaking again. But not from the wind. The creature in the lobby was thrashing. It was agitated. Maybe the burning lithium batteries of the drone were hurting it. What do we do now? Mrs. Gable asked. She was done crying. She was in that state of shock where everything is just a fact. We go up, I said. The drone said the foundation is failing. That means the bottom goes first. But also, the roof. The Orion has a helipad. I saw it on the diagrams when I moved in next door. You said there's no rescue, Jack said. I said there's no rescue in this sector, I corrected. But if that drone was transmitting data, someone is receiving it. If we can get to the roof, maybe we can signal a human pilot. Or maybe we just find a place to die with a view. It was a grim joke, but nobody laughed. We spent the next hour moving. We found a stairwell in the core of the Orion. Unlike the Zenith, this one wasn't infested. The doors were sealed tighter. The air pressure was positive. It smelled sterile. We climbed. Floor 50. Floor 60. At floor 65, we heard the sound. It was coming from outside. A deep, grinding rumble that grew louder and louder until it drowned out the rain. I opened the stairwell door and ran to a window facing west. "Oh my God," I whispered. Jax joined me. We were looking at the Zenith. The lights in the penthouse were flashing frantically. I could see muzzle flashes, tiny sparks of gunfire from the 60th floor. Sterling was fighting. But he wasn't fighting people. The swarm of crabs had reached the top. The glass skin of the penthouse was black with them. They were pouring in through the shattered windows. But that wasn't the sound. The sound was the tower itself. The Zenith was tilting. The foundation scour the drone had warned about. It was happening. The giant residential needle, 70 stories of ego and engineering, was leaning. "It's going," I said. It happened in slow motion. The lean passed the center of gravity. The structural steel shrieked, a sound like 1,000 violins snapping at once. The Zenith didn't fall like a tree. It slid. The base kicked out, and the tower sheared in half at the 20th floor. The top 50 floors, including my apartment, my clothes, my life, and Sterling's fortress, toppled sideways. It hit the water with an impact that defied description. A tsunami of black water rose up, 300 stories high. It smashed into the buildings around it. The shockwave hit the Orion a second later. Boom! The glass windows of the 65th floor blew inward. I tackled Mrs. Gable and Jax, covering them with my body as a blizzard of safety glass shards swept over us. The floor pitched violently. The Orion swayed, way past its design limit. I felt the floor tilt 10 degrees, then 20. I gripped the carpet, waiting for the snap, waiting for us to follow the Zenith into the dark. The building groaned. It swung back. then forward again, then back. It held. Barely. I stood up, shaking glass out of my hair. The wind was screaming through the broken windows now. I looked out. The Zenith was gone. Just a churning patch of white foam and debris in the black ocean. The landlord, the worm thing, and the giant squid. They would be feasting tonight. "Sterling is gone," Jack said, staring at the empty spot in the skyline. "Everyone is gone," I said. I looked down at the backpack I had taken from Sterling. "The radio." "Jax, give me the radio." He fumbled it out of the bag. It was a high-end maritime handheld. Sterling said there was nothing but static. I turned it on. I scanned the frequencies. Static, static, static. Then, on channel 16, the emergency channel, a voice. Weak, breaking up, but human. "Any station." "This is USS Kearsarge. Holding position. 10 miles east. If you can hear this, signal flares." 10 miles, I whispered. "They're offshore." "We don't have flares," Jack said. I looked at the destroyed office around us. I looked at the ceiling tiles. I looked at the sprinkler system. "No," I said, my engineer brain clicking into overdrive. "We don't have flares. But we have a building full of lithium-ion batteries in the server room, and we have a natural gas line for the executive kitchen on the 70th floor." "What are you planning, Miles?" Mrs. Gable asked. "I'm going to turn the Orion Tower into a candle," I said. "We're going to the roof, and we're going to light a fire they can see from space." We moved fast. The shockwave had damaged the Orion. I could hear water rushing in the lower elevator shafts. The collapse of the Zenith had displaced millions of gallons of water, and the surge was battering our foundation now. We reached the 70th floor. The executive suite. It was opulent. Real wood paneling. A kitchen that would make a chef weep. I found the gas line behind the massive wolf range. I used my wrench to disconnect the coupling. The hiss of gas filled the room immediately. "Jax, grab every laptop, every battery backup, every piece of electronics you can find. Pile them here. In the hallway, not the kitchen. We need a fuse." We worked like madmen. We built a pyramid of plastic and lithium batteries in the doorway. "The gas will fill the kitchen," I explained. "It needs to reach the right stoichiometric ratio, the right mix of air and fuel. If we light it too soon, it just burns. If we wait too long, it's too rich. And if we get it right?" Jax asked. "It blows the windows out and creates a jet of fire 50 feet long. Blue and orange. Distinctive. And us. We'll be on the roof. The blast will go out, not up. Hopefully." It was a terrible plan. It was an engineer's desperation play. We climbed the final service stairs to the roof access door. I pushed it open. The wind on the roof was hurricane force. It tore at our clothes. The rain stung like buckshot. The helipad was there, a white H painted on grey concrete. But we weren't alone. Crouched on the edge of the helipad, clinging to the landing lights, was one of them. Not a small one. Not a scavenger. This one was different. It was darker, its shell mottled with black and green. It was missing a claw. It was scarred. It turned its head toward us. Its antennae twitched. It stood between us and the edge of the roof where I needed to be to see the ship. "Jax," I said, unzipping my backpack, "do you remember how to use a flare gun? You said we didn't have flares." "We don't," I said, pulling out a heavy, red canister I had found in Sterling's bag, something I hadn't mentioned. But Sterling did. He just didn't use it because he didn't want to leave his whiskey. I tossed the flare gun to Jax. "That's for the ship," I said. I pulled out the pry bar. "This," I said, looking at the monster on the helipad, "is for the bug. I am not a soldier. I've said that before. I'm an engineer. Soldiers are trained to fight. Engineers are trained to calculate failure points. And right now, looking at the creature on the helipad, I calculated my failure point was about 3 seconds away. The creature was massive. It wasn't like the scavengers in the vents. Its shell was thick, crusted with barnacles and black algae. It hunkered low against the wind, its multiple legs gripping the concrete drainage grooves of the roof. Its antennae whipped around wildly, tasting the storm. It knew we were there. It was blocking the only clear landing zone. "Jax," I shouted over the gale. "Go left, toward the HVAC units. Mrs. Gable, stay behind the stairwell door." "What are you doing?" Jax screamed, clutching the orange flare gun with white-knuckled hands. "I'm moving the obstruction." I stepped out onto the wet concrete. I banged the steel pry bar against the metal flashing of the roof edge. Clang, clang. "Hey!" I roared. "Over here, you ugly, bottom-feeding reject." The creature's head snapped toward me. Its mandibles clicked, a sound loud enough to cut through the wind. It hissed, a spray of seawater erupting from its mouthparts. It charged. It didn't run like a dog. It flowed, a ripple of legs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. I didn't run away. I ran toward the edge. The Orion Tower had a decorative parapet, a 3-foot wall around the roof. I sprinted for the corner, sliding on the slick roof coating. The creature was faster. It closed the gap in 2 seconds. I could smell it, that rotting kelp stench amplified by the rain. Just as it lunged, I dropped. I threw myself flat on the wet concrete and slid like a baseball player stealing base. The creature's momentum, combined with the 70-mile-per-hour wind gust hitting us from the ocean, betrayed it. It tried to stop, its claws screeching on the roof, sparks flying. But physics is a cruel mistress. It slid over me. Its heavy, armored belly scraped my jacket, knocking the wind out of me. It hit the parapet wall hard. The concrete cracked. The creature flailed, its front legs hooking over the edge, trying to pull itself back. I scrambled up. I didn't swing the pry bar at its head. I swung it at the parapet. The mortar was already weakened by the water damage and the buildings swaying. I drove the chisel tip of the bar into the crack beneath the creature's grip. "Evicted!" I screamed, and I heaved. The chunk of concrete gave way. The creature shrieked, a high, human-like sound that made my skin crawl, as its anchor point crumbled. It slipped backward. For a second, it hung in the air, legs grasping at the rain. Then, it plummeted into the fog, chasing the debris of the Zenith down to the water. I collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. "Jax!" I yelled. "Now! Fire the flare!" Jax stepped out from behind the AC unit. He pointed the flare gun straight up, but the wind wrestled his arm. "Aim into the wind," I coached. "Arc it!" POP hiss. The red magnesium star shot out of the barrel. It fought the storm, burning fiercely. It arced over the Orion Tower, a blood-red streak against the grey clouds. It hung there for 6 seconds, illuminating the rain like falling rubies, before drifting down toward the sea. We waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing but the dark ocean and the rain. They didn't see it. Jax whispered, lowering the gun. "The fog is too thick." "Wait," I said. Then, through the roar of the storm, a new sound. Thwop 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 thwop. Rotor blades. Heavy ones. A searchlight cut through the clouds like a knife. It swept over the empty space where the Zenith used to be, then swung to the Orion. The helicopter emerged from the gloom. A Navy Seahawk, grey and menacing. It was fighting the turbulence, crabbing sideways to hold position. It hovered 100 feet above the roof. It couldn't land. The wind was too strong. A side door slid open. A cable lowered. A rescue basket. "Go!" I grabbed Mrs. Gable. We dragged her to the center of the H. The basket hit the concrete with a metallic clang. "Get in!" I shouted. Mrs. Gable climbed in, terrified. I locked the carabiner. I waved my arm. The cable pulled taut. She rose into the air, spinning slightly in the wash. The helicopter winched her up. She disappeared into the cabin. The basket came back down. "Jax, you're next." "No. You go. Go, damn it. I need to trigger the gas." The flare worked. "We don't need the gas." I looked at the floor. I could feel it. A vibration that wasn't the wind. "Jax," I said, my voice low. The flare called the helicopter, but it also called something else. I pointed to the edge of the roof. Huge, wet suckers, the size of dinner plates, were curling over the parapet wall. The squid thing from the lobby. The one that ate the drone. It had climbed the exterior. Or maybe the water had risen that high. Jax stared at the tentacles. He jumped into the basket. "Get me out!" he screamed. The basket jerked upward. As Jax rose, a massive tentacle lashed out from the edge of the roof. It slapped the concrete where he had been standing a second ago, shattering the helipad lights. The helicopter pilot saw it. The Seahawk banked hard, pulling Jax away from the roof to keep him clear of the monster. But that left me alone. I stood in the center of the roof. The basket was winching Jax in, but the helicopter was drifting away to avoid the tentacles. The creature pulled itself up. It was nightmare fuel, a beak surrounded by a writhing mass of muscle, eyes the size of beach balls, staring at me with cold, alien intelligence. It blocked the wind. It raised two massive tentacles, preparing to crush me. I looked at the stairwell door. The gas. I had left the pile of batteries and laptops at the bottom of the stairs, in the hallway of the 70th floor. The kitchen gas line was open. The floor below me was a bomb waiting for a match. I reached into my pocket. I didn't have a lighter. I didn't have a match. I had the radio. And I had the pry bar. "Hey!" I yelled at the squid. "You want a structural assessment? Here it is." I turned and ran toward the stairwell door. The squid struck. The tentacle slammed down, crushing the AC unit next to me. Shrapnel flew. A piece of metal sliced my cheek. I dove through the open stairwell door and slammed it shut behind me. I slid down the stairs to the landing. The smell of gas was overpowering. It made me dizzy instantly. The pile of electronics was right there. I needed a spark. I grabbed the pry bar. I grabbed a heavy emergency battery backup unit from the pile, an old lead-acid brick. I smashed the battery casing with the pry bar. Nothing. Above me, the roof buckled. The squid was tearing the roof off to get to me. Concrete dust rained down. I hit the battery again. Hard. I drove the steel bar into the terminals. Spark. A bright blue arc jumped from the terminal to the bar. That was all it took. I threw myself down the next flight of stairs, rolling into a ball, covering my head. Kaboom! The world turned white. The shockwave lifted me off the stairs and slammed me into the wall. My ears popped. Above me, the 70th floor ceased to exist. The gas explosion blew the windows out, yes, but it also blew the roof up. The blast wave hit the squid from underneath. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The massive weight on the building vanished. The creature must have been blown back into the ocean, or at least knocked off its perch. The Orion Tower groaned, a sound like a dying whale. The explosion had severed the structural columns on the 70th floor. The building wasn't just swaying anymore. It was tipping. I scrambled up, coughing smoke. I climbed back up the stairs. The roof access door was gone. The stairwell opened directly to the sky. The roof was a ruin of twisted rebar and fire. The gas was still burning, a massive jet of blue flame roaring into the storm, just like I predicted. The helicopter was there. It was hovering low, bathed in the orange glow of the fire. The basket wasn't lowered. The pilot was waving at me frantically. He couldn't stabilize the basket in the thermal updraft of the fire. He dropped the cable. Just the hook and the wire. The building lurched. The horizon tilted. The Orion was going over. Jump! I screamed to myself. I ran across the burning, tilting roof. I didn't aim for the hook. I aimed for the skid. I leaped off the edge of the dying skyscraper. For a second, I was flying. My hands hit the cold, wet metal of the helicopter's landing skid. I gripped it with everything I had left. My gloves slipped, then caught. My legs dangled over the void. Below me, I saw the Orion Tower falling away. It tipped slowly, majestically, sliding into the black water. The blue flame on the roof acted like a tracer, marking its descent into the deep. A crew chief leaned out of the helicopter door. He grabbed my jacket. "I got you," he roared. He hauled me up. I tumbled onto the metal floor of the cabin. Jax was there. Mrs. Gable was there. The door slid shut. I lay on the floor of the Seahawk, vibrating with the engine. I crawled to the window. We were gaining altitude. The pilot was banking away from the city. I looked back. The coastline was gone. The city was a graveyard of stumps poking out of the water, and in the center of the ruins, where the Zenith and the Orion used to be, the water was churning. A shape rose from the depths. The landlord. The massive worm I had seen earlier. It breached the surface, rolling over the spot where the towers had fallen. It was colossal, hundreds of feet long. It seemed to be claiming the territory. Then we hit the cloud layer. The grey fog swallowed the view. The city disappeared. The monsters disappeared. There was only the hum of the engine and the red light of the cabin instrument panel. Jax handed me a bottle of water. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. Mrs. Gable reached out and squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. I leaned my head back against the bulkhead and closed my eyes. I could still hear the clicking in my head. I could still smell the gas. I thought about the bunker guy, the story I'd heard years ago about a man under a highway ramp. He survived by hiding. I survived by climbing. The narrator's voice in my head, my own voice, finally went quiet. I wasn't an engineer anymore. I wasn't a tenant. I was a refugee of the high water mark.